night may be long and the dark may be deep, but the answers are there to be found. Whether it's the normal, the abnormal, or the paranormal, you're in the right place. Let's go beyond reality.
Welcome to the show, everybody. We've got a great week lined up for you, too, and we're going to start with a pretty interesting topic. Not just UFOs, not just aliens, but we're going to be talking about star visitors and the star nations. These are topics that Dr. Richard Boylan is an expert on, and he's going to be on the program to chat about it. All right, so let's take a break. When we come back, we'll start talking about star nations and star visitors with our guest, Dr. Richard Boylan.
You're listening to Jason and JV Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
Please support the program. Go to patreon.com/Johhaw. That's JOHAW. Dr. Boylan, welcome to the program. It's really great to have you on tonight.
Thank you, JV and Jason. It's really good to speak with you.
Oh, well, thank you. We've been looking forward to this.
So let's kind of get some definitions out of the way here so we all are on the same page. First of all, tell us who the star visitors are.
Well, it's a term for referring to intelligent humanoid figures from outer space with an emphasis on the ones that make it their business to come to Earth and show up in the skies or appear in front of one or more persons, whence the term visitors.
And is this a term they've given themselves, or is this a term that we've given them?
Well, mostly the term extraterrestrial gets thrown around, but I had occasion working with a Native American elder who calls star visitors into his sweat lodge for consultation, that the word got back to us that they didn't like the term extraterrestrial. It sounded too clinical and detached, and they wanted something that was a little more human. So I came up with the term star visitors, and they said that's fine.
So you came up with the term, but they approved it.
Yeah, that's fine. It gets away from the scary monster movie kind of stuff and the clinical detachment that some scientists try to apply to it, because these are real folks and they have personalities and feelings, and they want to be seen as, if not humans, at least a parallel kind of life form.
Yeah, when you say extraterrestrial, of course, you start thinking of, scary little alien guys, whether they're doing probing or cattle mutilation or any of that thing. So the star visitors,
I guess. Yeah, the term has really been degraded by the people that try to put out disinformation about them and put out scare stories. So that's part of it, too. They just like to move away from that term and try something fresh that allows people to approach it with an open mind.
So, Richard, are these star visitors coordinated as a group, or when you use this term star visitors, you're talking about any that kind of fall into that definition that you said?
Well, when I use it in my lectures and so forth, I talk about all intelligent life forms out in the universe, but I use a special application for people that come to Earth, because what interests us is who's visiting us. So practically, in terms of working in UFO circles, I refer to those that are actually showing up on Earth or in our skies.
And is it these star visitors that you refer to that make up the star nations that we are going to be talking about?
Yes, very, very good. There are many, many millions, if not billions, of civilizations of intelligent life out there in all the various galaxies. But Star Nations is the organization of intelligent civilizations in our galaxy, the Milky Way. That's not to say there aren't other galaxies with other civilizations, and they may organize themselves this way or that way, but as far as we're concerned, our home galaxy is Milky Way, and our sun and our Earth are in it, and so we are the subject of visit by these star visitors, and the ones in our galaxy who are highly advanced civilizations. In other words, they've evolved beyond warlike behaviors. Earth obviously has not reached that point yet. Formed a confederation, if you will, a kind of space United Nations of all the higher intelligent civilizations that have not only got their own development together in a good way, but actually engage in outreach. They have formed patrols that go out and look for other civilizations that haven't been discovered yet within our Milky Way. And when they find one that is developed enough, they invite them to join the Star Nations organization, which is a organization of all the higher developed intelligent civilizations.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, and I think you just answered that. The Star Nations is pretty much the equivalent of the Earth's United Nations.
It is, and there's even a little talk that the idea for United Nations came from Star Nations quietly reaching out to some of the human leaders after World War II, when peace was upon us, and for a while there, and all the countries that have been ravaged by World War II were trying to figure out how to come together and try and solve problems without another world war. And the idea was floated by the Star Visitors to some of the leaders that they might think about forming a similar organization that was universal, in this case universal to Earth, just like Star Nations is universal to the Milky Way galaxy. And let it be a forum for communication, discussion, problem solving, and other cooperative activity.
Richard, how long have you been aware of the presence and the activity of these star visitors?
Well, that goes back decades. I had my first UFO sighting in 1977, but I go back, I'm a senior citizen there, I go back farther than that. I go back to where, when I was a small child, my parents in 45 were talking about a story on the radio news about how a UFO had crashed, a disc they called it, at Roswell. And then, of course, later the Army denied it, but I thought that was really interesting. I was excited that there's other people out there, and it's not just us. Yeah. And then in 1952, we had in July, we had a series in the United States and Washington, D.C. of UFOs fly over the nation's capital in formation for several nights. That made newspaper stories all over the nation, as you can imagine.
Yeah, it did. Terrified a lot of people.
The government was real squirrely about that, and eventually just hoped it would die out and started to have their scientists say it was swamp gas or a flight of geese or something. But the people who saw it knew darn well it wasn't swamp gas. But
right. Richard, you had said that there were a couple events during the course of your childhood that really made you stand up and take notice as to what was going on. One of them, of course, was the Roswell incident. The other was the formation of alien spacecraft that flew over Washington, D.C. So these things happened to you, and it made you open your eyes. Pick up the story from there.
Yeah, this was before the UFO cover-up. People forget, they are old enough to remember, there was a time when it was okay to acknowledge that there were UFO sightings way back in the 1940s. But the government did put in the cover-up, especially after that flyover of craft over the nation's capital night after night in 1952, and so they covered it up. But I'm one of that old generation that know better than to believe the cover-up, because we were around when it was still legal to believe in UFOs and to acknowledge them and see them in the newspapers. And there were UFO clubs where people would put out chairs on their lawn and invite the neighbors over and see if anything flew overhead. So it was very normal, so to speak, in those days. And then the cover-up tried to create official ridicule, and people backed away from being so open about it.
They try to make it seem like everybody who talks about UFOs or possible aliens is crazy. But now with these star visitors that you claim to be able to connect with, have you ever asked them about the flyovers that happened way back then over DC?
Well, I don't know that particular topic came up, but they've been plenty of flyovers since over various places. The strategy seems to be, if that happens, I guess it's government influence on the media, that the story gets localized to the town where it actually happened, and maybe it makes the paper there, but doesn't go on the national wire services. And
but when it comes down to them actually flying over the White House, that would almost see, or DC in general, that would almost seem as either an intimidation factor, or just to do that is trying to put the word out there for something, for a reason.
Yeah, well, way back, Star visitors, Star Nations had representatives come and talk to world leaders about, tell your people we're here, we're peaceful, we're friendly. It's time for everybody on Earth to grow up and realize there's a much bigger world out there, and we're part of it, and let's reach out in friendship and get acquainted. But, and explicitly, this happened to President Eisenhower in the early 1950s, and he was summoned to a meeting with them at Muroc Dry Lake, what we now call Edwards Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert in California. And several prominent citizens accompanied him, along with the usual government officials accompanying a president. And they saw him go up to this craft and go inside and talk with the people there. This particular race of extraterrestrials or star visitors was very human-like looking. They wore very tight-fitting jumpsuits, but they were particularly human-like looking and not a little different, like the Zetas or other races that people see often depicted. And they told him what I just said, that they would like the whole world to know this and to develop a friendly attitude, and for the government leaders to continue to meet with the star visitors about arranging ways to make this truth known and to share information and do what we might call today cultural exchange missions, etc. But Eisenhower said, the people aren't ready for that. Give me time. Well, time has passed. That was, I'm going to say 53. I have to look up the exact year, but
are you talking
in the middle 50s? And here we are in 2018. Over a half century has passed, and the clock's still ticking, and the government leaders are still keeping mum on this.
Well, but that brings into question the whole idea, if these star visitors are able to be here, to be able to fly over DC and evade being shot out of the sky, which you'd think would be something that would happen, and they want everybody to know, why haven't they just said the hell with it, the hell with the government and everybody, and we'll just let people know on our own? Especially knowing that the governments in almost every country out there have some corrupt or secret agenda, a reason for keeping all this hidden from us?
Well, the star visitors are part of a higher civilization than the people of Earth. They are what we might consider delicate in their feelings and not wanting to seem heavy-handed or ham-handed or forcible. They were hoping to get voluntary cooperation from the leadership on Earth to allow this to unfold in the open in a quiet and a formal and friendly way. But the lid has been kept on the thing, so that hasn't happened. But I will end that recitation of delay with this. I personally have gotten very tired waiting over the years, and I've talked to various people inside government, in the military and intelligence, fairly high up, and everybody knows what the story is, but nobody I talk to is in a position to make it happen. And people at the top of government leadership still want to keep the lid on. So I talked to Star Nations about, enough with this calm, patient, gradual approach. It isn't getting anywhere. The cover-up is almost 70 years and counting. And I say what we need is a demonstration that cannot be denied, cannot be suppressed, cannot be kept off television or the Internet. And there was some back-and-forth dialogue, and what we came to an agreement about is that Star Nations will position fleets of their starships filling the skies over 5 major cities all on the same day and night. Those 5 cities would be L.A., Minneapolis, Nashville, Monterrey in Mexico, and London. Same day, same night. And when that happens, and they will stay up there for 14 hours. Now, today's world, people cannot fail to notice that. If it's dark, it'll be the sky filled with lighted ships, and if it's daytime, they can see the ships up there. And they'll be whipping out their cell phones and taking pictures and shipping them to their friends and maybe the press and all over the world. And the UFO cover-up will be dead as a doornail at that point. And then the public will insist on the leadership telling them, they're up there. You can't deny they're up there. What's going on? Tell us, what's going to happen next, and are they talking to you? We need to know. And the government's going to be in the very uncomfortable position of eventually being forced to acknowledge decades and decades of quiet, secret contacts with select star visitor representatives who've come and tried to dialogue, because there are people who are sitting on this information about what the government knows and has known for decades, and once the cover is blown, they will come forward because their secrecy oaths are no longer valid, and the UFO cover-up will be over, and the governments will be seen to have not treated their people well by keeping them away from the truth.
No, and I understand that, but just two quick questions, and then I know we got to take a break. But all right, so first one would be, I mean, if ships just showed up in the sky, of course it would be amazing. But again, the government could just say, "Wow, look, aliens are real," and not ever have to disclose that they knew anything about it in the past.
Well, they may not, but there are people alive and recently departed who've written books about what they knew. People like Dr. Michael Wolff or Colonel Philip Corso, Army, who described their experiences talking with them in their official roles as military and intelligence representatives of the government. And there are plenty of others in that position, too, once the secrecy is gone, who can step up to the mic and say what they know and how long they've known it.
All right. So then they'll just be able to, say it's all happened. And one other thing, on what date is this supposedly going to happen?
$64,000 question.
Or 65?
I get the impression it is this year. I do not have the exact date. That has not been given to me. I think the star visitors are watching world events and trying to find a window of relative calm and peace to put on this display. They don't want to be competing for bandwidth or lead news story time with some horrible tragedy or war breaking out or something. So they have to find the right opportunity. But it is coming.
Okay.
I would imagine that when it happens, there'd be very few news stories that could actually take the front page away from that. And Richard, I want to ask about one of the things that we had intended to talk about, just to kind of get it established here. But tell us about the diplomatic mission that was established in 2017. What is it, and what's its intention?
Well, Star Nations is ready to go the minute the leadership on Earth is ready to engage them in dialogue and what we might call diplomacy and opening official relations, formal relations between the nations of Earth and the nations of the stars. So they authorized the establishment of a Star Nations diplomatic mission. There's a few of us that they've worked with very closely on my team that are kind of the core of that on the Earth side, or at least the bridging folks. Ultimately, the objective is to get a treaty of peace and friendship agreed on and signed between the United Nations and Star Nations. Star Nations is ready to go. It's the UN that needs to agree to that treaty and sign it from Earth's side, if you will. And then they are prepared to follow through with an ongoing series of engagements in cultural relations and scientific relations. They envision things like setting up experience centers, cultural centers where people can come and meet with star visitors and learn about the various races out there, and they can get a better feeling for the various peoples on Earth and what we're like. There will be centers for scientific information exchange. There will be workshops or expositions by Star Nations representatives talking about what they believe about the spiritual matters, what they understand to be the case about what we call astronomy and physics and advanced quantum reality and so forth. In other words, there will be a and humane exchange. Ultimately, they would like to set up an arrangement where people who would like to volunteer to could take a trip to one of their planets to see what it's like close up. And conversely, they would like to have humans agree for them to have some of their people come and visit various countries and
which I
see
believe
what they're like.
I believe, and we have to take a break here, but I believe you wrote recently about one of something that has actually happened already, where a dying planet has sent a number of their residents, or if you want to call them their species, I guess, to live on Earth as a way to avoid extinction. Richard, we were talking about the diplomatic mission that was established last year, and the meaning of it and the intentions of it. But I want to back up because you've used some words. You've talked about you yourself being an ambassador, or maybe it was a counselor. I know if both words have been used. Tell us what that means. Is that an official title, or is that a title you use just to explain your relationship? And when did you start communicating with the star visitors and the star nations?
Well, counselor is an official title that the Star Nations use for the designee who is the planetary representative from a given civilization to the Council of the Star Nations, the Council being roughly the equivalent of the UN General Assembly. In other words, representatives from all the member civilizations, member inhabited planets, send each a representative to meet and do problem solving and planning and advance the purposes of the Star Nations organization. So I often use it interchangeably with ambassador, because ambassador is the human word for representative of a nation or a people. The Star Nations uses counselor because their counselor means a member of their high council, so they're kind of interchangeable. As to your other question about how far back I was in communication with them.
Yeah, when did you start communicating with them?
Well, there have been various occasions. It started out more informally. I have a couple friends who are very adept at telepathy, which is their preferred form of communication, mind to mind, not using out loud language. And when I was first engaging with some of the star visitors, I've used that help from a couple of my associates who are very good at that. I've become a little better over time, but they were way ahead of me, so I kind of crutched on with their help on dialogue back and forth. I've had, however, star visitors show up in person in front of me and say a few words, so it hasn't all been third party. This goes back to, and I've had star visitors come into sweat lodges when I was working with Dakota Sioux spiritual leader who led sweat lodges. He was the star keeper, the Star Nation specialist for the Dakota Sioux tribe of the Yankton Sioux Reservation. And when we were in Sweat Lodge, a star visitor would come in from time to time, and we would get a message. So there have been various ways I've had dialogue, but and occasionally they've even put words on my computer while I'm going along typing. So this goes back several decades now. So things have moved along quite a ways.
Yeah, but
over that time,
obviously, if I was whether I'm sitting at my computer or I'm receiving a message telepathically or a star visitor shows up at my door. I mean, that's got to be a kind of a groundbreaking day. How did they pick you? Were you doing something that caught their attention, or did you seek them out? What was the mechanism by which this whole thing started for you?
Well, they sought me. I didn't seek them. I didn't apply for the job. They used my close friend as a telepathic intermediary, and basically laid out, are you willing to be our representative? I, at that point, was quite well known on the UFO lecture circuit for specializing in Star Nations matters and Star Visitor matters, and with a lot more dignity and without some of the hype and hokum that too often shows up at UFO conferences. They like that. But I'll give you a deeper answer if you wish. It involves understanding the reality of reincarnation. What I've come to understand is that in a previous life, I was an extraterrestrial, a star visitor, if you will, myself. And it was on not only that, but a counselor, one of the members, representatives, ambassadors on the Star Nations High Council, and had some facility. Eventually got to be the head of their council for many years. And when I finished my life as a star visitor and reincarnated as a human, they kept track of me across incarnations and saw my presence here on Earth as an opportunity to have someone who kind of instinctively is in their corner. And so when they did the outreach, it was them coming from that particular point of view.
All right, let's jump to our phone lines here. We do have some questions from listeners. This is Tyler calling in from Kentucky. Hey, Tyler, welcome to the show.
Okay, so basically, there have, of course, been speculations throughout time that these star visitors have helped in certain wonders of the Earth, such as the pyramids. And I'm just kind of wondering, at what point in history did we, as a society, start dismissing the idea of these star visitors, and when did we start trying to cover this up?
It's a great question. So if I understand Tyler correctly, he's saying if they helped us build things like the pyramids, clearly there was some coordinated interaction between humans and these star visitors, and that must have ended at some time, at some point, when we started to, first of all, not believe they were here, secondly, not acknowledge they were here, thirdly, covered up in the case of many governments. What's the answer to that, Richard?
Well, Tyler is correct that the star visitors have interacted with society for a long time. You know, very shallow pop UFO lore would have all of that start in 1947 when a UFO crashed in Roswell, but that is not the case. The star visitors have interacted with human society from the beginning. Yes, there was some helpfulness with the Egyptian culture, the ancient Egyptian culture, in not only things like building the pyramids, but having an understanding of about the soul, life, and life after death and reincarnation. Those are ideas that ISIS, one of the counselors of the Star Nations High Council, came down and went among the Egyptian people as a teacher, and she was seen as a goddess because she was so advanced. It's all the mental category they had for her. But she taught them things that we would call spirituality and understanding good morality and right living, and also things like medicine and healing techniques and things like how to work with sound and energy and vibration to get these heavy stones into place. But their interaction goes back much farther than that. Almost all the ancient original civilizations and cultures on Earth have had interaction with the star visitors. There's a section on my website that talks about various roles of star visitors in human development, and Tyler and others can go to that, the role of star visitors in human development, and get an eyeful there. But I'm going to give you the $64 question answer that we as a human race did not just evolve. Yes, we evolved as from primate stock up to a certain high level, but then the star visitors came by and saw that Earth was a well-developed physical planet, and that it had evolved species, one of which was suitable for intelligent life to get housed in it with a little genetic tinkering. And so they did what we would call some gene splicing, genetic engineering, if you will, and eventually, through that method, brought forth a primate that had a bigger brain case, different kind of skeleton, walked upright, and they kept tinkering with it. About 275,000 years ago, they began this work and got the original human intelligent enough going, and then about 100,000 years ago, they came back and did a little more genetic upgrading, and what we now call Homo sapiens sapiens, modern man, emerged from that upgrading. And so our very existence as an intelligent species, maybe it would have happened given enough millennia naturally, but they advanced the process, moved it along faster than
Gotcha.
just random evolution might have done.
Richard, I want to kind of move the conversation a little bit, because you mentioned earlier about this coordinated effort to make a statement by these star nations, and over 5 cities, 3 of them in the United States, 1 of them in Mexico, and 1 is London in the UK. There's going to be a display. Is this display meant to intimidate? Is it meant just to make their presence known? And what do you think the public's reaction is going to be with this? Is it going to be one of fear, panic, or calm acceptance?
Well, their display is going to be hard to miss and hard to ignore. Their intention is certainly not to intimidate, quite the opposite. They're very anxious to try to avoid creating any fear. They want to make it very clear that they come in peace, and the display will be the crafts moving around in the sky. The purpose of it, from a human context, is they're trying to bust the UFO cover-up, and that will certainly do it. But not just that for itself, as kind of getting rid of an obstacle to people beginning to take it seriously, that we're not alone, that they're here, and that we need to be talking and learn more about each other. So that is the core agenda, and it's going to lead to other things, as we've talked about, formal diplomatic relations between star nations and the United Nations, and at a more cultural level, learning centers, cultural exchange centers where people can meet each other, various Earth nations and various star nations. And eventually exchange trips. Human volunteers going to another world to see what they're like and come back and tell folks. And
yeah, I need to ask you a little bit about that too. You mentioned earlier that there's hope that one day humans can travel to one of their home planets and see what it's like, get a feel for what that's about. But in order to do that, based on the distances involved, there must be some serious technology involved. Do you know anything about their technology and their ability for obviously faster than the speed of light space travel?
Well, a little bit. It involves quantum physics and the bending of space-time. Basically, and I'm no physics whiz, to be sure, but as I understand it, they basically, I'll use terms that get used, jump into hyperspace and kind of take a shortcut through space and time, and then come back down into what we would be pleased to call 3D reality at a new location. But because they've kind of cheated and taken a shortcut, it doesn't take, light year after light year to get there.
Yeah, because that obviously, I don't know physically how their makeup handles that type of travel, but we know that humans would have a little bit difficulty with that, particularly with the distances and the time involved. I don't know. Think about this. Some of the aspects of working with bending gravity, as they do, is that they've solved the problem of inertia. When humans get taken aboard a Zeta 30-meter disk and zip around in the sky, they aren't plastered against the back wall, squished because it's going so terribly fast. They've mastered the problem of inertia so that everybody just doesn't even need to sit down or hang on to something. It's like you're standing in your living room. There's no sense of being hurled about violently, but so by the same token, the jumps through space-time, and some of people I've talked with have been on such trips, there's no sense of oddness or damage or hurt or disorientation. It feels like you're riding in a Have you done this,
airliner?
Richard, have you been on one of these trips?
I have been on board, and I've gone up. I haven't, as far as I know, gone interplanetary, but I've been into near space, and it's just matter of fact. You might as well be in the lounge of a 747. In fact, you probably have more sensation of speed in a 747 than you would in one of these anti-gravity craft.
Tell us about star kids and star seeds.
Now my favorite topic within this genre. Well, we talked a little bit earlier about creative evolution and the visitors coming and using genetic engineering to kind of push the envelope of evolution faster than it would happen normally, and move us from people with their knuckles on the ground of the jungle to upright, intelligent beings. There have been 3 layers of major genetic upgrading in the human story since the star visitors came and worked with us, or our ancestors, I should say. I already spoke about the first one where they took a advanced primate, more developed than Lucy, the Australopithecus, and moved that genetically to the first human. Then there was the upgrade about 100,000 years ago to modern human, Homo sapiens sapiens. But over the last several decades, they've done a third wave of genetic upgrading. We we have a planet full of regular humans, but starting in the 70s and 80s and much more in the 90s and since, there have been a new breed of upgraded human, what I call the star kids or starseed adults, depending on how old they are, where they look and seem pretty much like regular humans, but they have additional abilities, or they have them more strongly than the regular human would, particularly in the areas of intelligence, and not always, brainy IQ. Some of the intelligence takes the form of intuitive intelligence, kind of learning through new means of getting to answers that don't just follow the path, straight line path, but kind of jump around and put things together that, when they're put together, a new piece of knowledge emerges. These kids have abilities that we would call psychic, things like mental telepathy, ability to shape energy and use it for healing. They can often know what's happening before it happens. Some of the better star kids can move objects by mental concentration, just mental energy, if you will. They can see things happening somewhere else and know about it without having to travel there to see it and learn about it. They can engage in mental dialogue with star visitors. Some of them are quite good at engaging mentally with their pets, know what they're thinking and feeling. They can see auras around people, many of them, and even get information from those auras, such as how the person's health is doing or what kind of mood they're in, or, are they of good energy or bad energy, kind of person you should avoid. When I've done workshops with these star kids and star seeds, we've done things like psychic diagnosis, where you kind of run your hand above their other person's energy field, maybe 3 or 4 inches off their body, and just kind of read that and find if there's a spot that's ill or hurting or needs healing. Few star kids can levitate. I had a mother tell me about her daughter who was meditating, and she came into the room, and there her daughter was several inches above the ground in a seated position. They sometimes these kids can use mental influencing on another person just by concentrating their thought. They can sometimes cause time to get faster or slower, like to make a trip happen faster than it normally would. They kind of bending space-time a little bit the way star visitor crafts do, only this at a personal level of just working with time to make it friendlier in terms of not taking so long to get something done. Some of them can tell if an earthquake's about to happen or a human disaster like a car crash. I had star kids.
How many of these star kids are there?
Well, good question. I'll give you I did this calculation a little while back, but it's pretty good numbers. Percentage-wise, it goes by ages, because the star visitors have been working with humans for several decades now. Obviously, there are more younger star kids now because the work has been going on, and some of the older star kids have grown up and had kids themselves, and so these kids are more advanced. Last time I did a sample and tested for star kid energy from infants up to 12 years old. About over 90% of the kids are star kids. In the teenagers, about 80%.
80%?
Young adults, say up to 29, two-thirds. Young middle adults, 30 to 45-year-old range, about 45%, not quite half. Middle-aged persons in the 45 to 60 crowd, 1 in 5. Senior citizens, about 1 in 8 are a star seed. So you see, at first there weren't so many, but now most of the kids being born and growing up are star kids. Now, it doesn't mean they're all awake and aware, and one of the reasons I'm quite anxious that the UFO cover-up come off and that our friends put on their display and the whole world knows they're real, is that that's going to wake up a lot of star kids who say, I've always felt odd all my life, and I've kept myself in the closet because I didn't want anybody to know I had these strange abilities and strange things happening to me.
So is it fair to say that we have people on the program all the time that have psychic abilities? We have people on the program that have precognitive abilities or remote view. Are these star kids or star children? Is that what they are?
Many of them are. Let me say this, because we as a human race, even back the first batch of genetic development was a mixture of star visitor genetics with human or Earth primate genetics. And then the modern humans, 100,000 years ago, when that change came in, an even richer blend of star visitor genes with human. And now the star kids are even a richer recipe. They wanted to get it just right so that this intelligent species on Earth would be sufficiently advanced that it would not make the mistake that has happened on some planets where they use their scientific and other knowledge to destroy themselves or the planet.
Yeah, we're not going to have time to get into that this time, Richard, because we're really at the end of our discussion here.
Okay.
It's been a fascinating conversation, and I think there's a lot more to talk about.
I'll just say that right now, over half the human race is star kids, star seeds.
Okay. The website, again, is drboylan.com. Doctor is abbreviated DR. Boylan is spelled Boylan. And there's a lot of information on there, including a lot of Richard's work, access to his books, and much, much more.
Dr. Boylan, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and we look forward to talking to you again at some point.
Very good. It's been a nice evening, and I wish you, Jason, JV, all the best, and I hope your show continues to grow.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Beyond Reality Paranormal is hosted by J.V. Johnson and produced by Orion Palmer and Slick Eddie Edwards. Like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please consider supporting the program either through your podcast platform, click on the link in the description, or on Patreon at Joha Productions. If you'd like to be a guest on Beyond Reality Paranormal, or you have a recommendation for a guest, contact our producer, Slick Eddie Edwards. Eddie is spelled with a Y at slickeddieedwards@gmail.com.